Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for coming out or going in. Thanks for coming in on a day that we should be out. It's good to have a place indoors, but you know that it's all really happening out there, right? Here, I'm just a facsimile of that, of what is out there, of the landscape, the mesas, the canyons. I live vicariously through myself. I look back at the stories and I rewrite them. I guess writing is an act of living vicariously, even if it's what you did yourself. You're looking back through those experiences and then putting them into words. And but where it's really happening is outside these doors, is out on the ground where you can hear your steps. And you can sense the change of light, how the wind moves, how the shadows and the clouds run over the ground. We have to come inside on occasion. So I thank you for being in here. And thank you to Grand Mesa Arts and to the library. I think probably 5 or 6 books, my first books were all written in either laundromats or libraries. That's the mainstay for my writing is when I end up in a town or a city or anywhere, any civilized place, and I've got a moment of time, I go find the library and I sit down there and I write. It helps to write when you're surrounded by books, when you're surrounded by so many people's stories, and you know, as a writer, what that means. You see each book and you go, oh wow, that was somebody's heart torn open and blood just poured over the pages, and then you look at all those books. And so that's inspiring for me. Before we get serious about this, I want to do a little something. I want you to try to forget that you're inside of a building. And it's a nice one. It's nice to have a theater like this. It's nice to have a stage. But get rid of the stage. Imagine that you're in a sandstone canyon, let's say. A place that is deep and hollowed out. Flash floods down in the bottom have worn it into these shapes of shells and flutes, and every sound echoes. When you hear a breeze, it bounces from wall to wall, and you can hear the sound down in the bottom. So for a moment, let's not be in here. Let's be out in the canyon. Thank you. I carry this, it's a Japanese shakuhachi flute, and I carry it around with me in the backcountry, partly because it's lighter than a trombone, and that was what I used to play. And also because it's hearing the echoes. You triangulate. You can hear places that you can't see. The sound wraps around up inside of alcoves, And so you're down in the bottom of a canyon playing, and then you listen to the echo, and you can hear the topography up there. So that's one of the flutes that I carry around. Happy Father's Day. For all the fathers out there. It's one of the most wonderful, challenging, painful, incredible tasks that I know of. I suppose second only to motherhood, maybe. But this is not your day. This is Father's Day, and on the subject of desert dwellers, I should bring up my father, because I think desert dwellers, we are desert dwellers. We live in a dry landscape where people have been living for thousands of years. People have been living since the end of the Ice Age. They lived here before the Ice Age, before the desert was established like it is now, but generations going back. My generations are very few going back in the desert. My father was born in southern New Mexico, in the mysterious town of Roswell. And that is my family from southern New Mexico, from West Texas. My great-grandfather taught range management in the Big Bend Desert of West Texas, out of Sul Ross, what's now Sul Ross University, and my family line comes out of that part of the world, the high windswept Chihuahuan Desert, where I guess I'm from the Motorhead clan. One of my father's grandfather sold used cars in Roswell, and my grandfather ran the Roswell Body Shop, and that's where my lineage comes from. But I think about my lineage coming from a place, coming from a landscape. My parents moved to Phoenix. And I was born in Tempe, Arizona. And you could say that doesn't really make you a desert dweller if you live in Phoenix. But you're in it. You can see it. You can taste the desert from there. Even when it rains in Phoenix, you can smell the creosote out in the Sonoran Desert, the bushes that have that vibrant scent whenever the rain falls. And my father lived on the north end of Phoenix before the city got there. So he lived out in the desert, and we watched the glow year by year moving north toward him, and watched the developments move in. I remember the signs along the highways, just road signs spray painted, "Save our desert." And now wherever that was is 20 miles into the city, as we have moved out there into the land of saguaros and all those beautiful buttes that now are hugged by strip malls and car dealerships. And I remember being with my father, looking out of his backyard out into the saguaros, and you could see the glow of Phoenix coming. And he would tell me that sometimes, I don't know if this is real or not, I don't know if he really saw this, but he told me that sometimes he could see these electric blue dancers out in the desert. And his descriptions of them were the same dancers that you see on the Hohokam pottery from 1,000 years ago, from the Phoenix Basin. And he told me sometimes he could see them out there. And I don't know if he really could or not, or maybe that's just what you see when you look into the desert. You see the dancers who've been there for so long, the stories that have been playing out in the ground, so many stories in the earth there. Where I was born in Tempe, the landscape is mounded with archaeology, and of course the subdivisions go over it. There are neighborhoods and corner markets and hospitals and the university, ASU, sitting right on top of it, but underneath is where the history is. I remember going to an excavation that was it was on campus. A parking lot was being pulled up for a future development, and and they found, I think, 40-some graves underneath the parking lot from Hohokam origin, so probably about 1300 AD. And right underneath the path for Sky Harbor Airport. So they're digging, surrounded by traffic and buildings, and they're finding skeletons that have pots all around their heads, ceramic vessels around their heads, and their forearm bones are covered with these shell bracelets that were walked up from the Sea of Cortez into the Phoenix area. And as I was watching them dig them up, I just thought, wow, we've been parking here for a long time. Did anybody think about this? Did anybody walk from their car to wherever they were going thinking, there are bodies underneath me right here. There are memories, there are rooms and chambers, there are grinding stones for corn. The ground has so much history in it. And I remember talking to the archaeologists on this project, and they were pulling everything out for repatriation, and it was returning to the tribes. But my question was, why not just dig a hole deeper and put them down farther and build on top of it rather than take this layer away? Why not leave ancestry here in the ground? Which I know that it's an unanswerable question because there's a lot involved here, but I think, why do we erase the history from a place? Because I want to walk across a parking lot and think, there are skeletons underneath me. There are so many memories and stories in the ground. I was talking to the woman who digs up the whenever they find a grave, a human burial, that was her job. She was then assigned to that, and they said she's our specialist. She does all the bodies, and I said, so what's your background? Why are you doing the skeletons? And she was sitting on the tailgate of a truck smoking a cigarette, talking to me, and she was starting to get cagey. She didn't really want to talk about it. She said it wasn't an academic specialty. It was just what they did, and the dig boss kept saying, you can tell them why you do this job. And I was, of course, as a writer, I was going, oh, there's something here, something interesting. She doesn't want to tell me, so I'm gonna press on it. And I kept going, well, you don't have to tell me, but I am curious. What is it about you that why are they giving you this job? And finally, I remember she was smoking her cigarette, and she just took her cigarette out, and she says, because I cry the whole time. And then she put out her cigarette and stopped talking to me. And I thought, oh, that's the best answer. It wasn't anything academic or scientific. It was that they said she knows how to handle this. She is the one who needs to be with these remains. And she had told me about a mother buried next to her fetus, and how they were together, and described it to me in detail, and I could understand. I think we look at the past and we think that it's beyond us. It's not human. It's something emotionless from long ago, and we forget that all these people who lived here were people like us, the same kinds of people with hands, the same kind of people who celebrated their own versions of Father's Day, who had families, who had lovers, who had friends, and who wept when they buried people. That's what I think about when I'm out there. When I see objects on the ground, when I see a potsherd, an arrowhead, I think, oh, love, pain. I think these were actual people like us. So I want to take you out there. I want to go on a bit of a journey this evening and look at some of these sites. Look at what it's like to be a desert dweller, because we're just a thin skim on history right now, learning how to live in the desert, because many of us came from non-desert landscapes. Our families came from Norway, from Great Britain, from places where it's green and rains. and places where you don't celebrate the same way when it rains. And before us, so many people lived in this desert, and how did it affect them? How did it change the way they see the world? I think landscapes make you who you are. I think living under Grand Mesa has to do something to you. Knowing that that thing is towering over you, that has to have an effect on your life. The way that the horizon is shaped shapes you. And so how did it shape people 1,000 years ago? I look at these signs and symbols, and I'm always looking at how they fit into the landscape. This is a spiral up on the head of a butte in northern Arizona, far northern Arizona, and spirals are all over the Southwest. Major theme out here, and I could talk for the next 2 hours on spirals. And what they possibly mean, but especially how important they are, how they show up in so many different cultural aspects, and often they have some kind of alignment feature. If you stick around and watch it for long enough, if you watch this every day of the year, you'll see all kinds of different treatments of the equinox sunrise cuts this right in half. And I don't remember what solstice sunrise does, but this is a particular sunrise that happens in May and July. And I was here a couple of years ago in May, up on top, looking to the north, where you're looking out into the Colorado Plateau Desert, up to the Four Corners. And this place was, if you had come here 1,000 years ago, there would have been people all over it. The Pueblo sites on every one of these high points, and down in the basins below, thousands upon thousands of people living in a place where I'd say that there are probably, I don't know, nobody. If you go far enough out, there's still remnants of what was here, of this larger civilization. The Hopi mesas are out there in the distance. So the Hopi pueblos and towns, villages are consolidated over here. A remnant of what was here before, a vibrant remnant, but compared to if you had been here 1,000 years ago, at night, there would have been fires all over. Pueblos lit up. And I went there at sunrise with my kid and some other folks, and watched the sun come up on this mesa top. And the first light that hits the very top comes through a crack in the rock, and that light lands here next to this spiral, and then it starts to move. It moves across the face, and then it lands right in the center. And the tip of this wedge of light is exactly the size of the circle in the middle of the spiral. And it's not a known site really. There were, I think, 6 of us there, and we all knew each other. So it's just a happenstance out there, but not a happenstance. Something that was planned. Something that this is sitting above the ruins of a pueblo that had hundreds and hundreds of rooms down below it. And this could mean a lot of things. It could mean this is the center place. This is where we have traveled for centuries and arrived at this place. Very much part of the Hopi ancestry, Pueblo ancestry, is arriving at a center place. The spiral is a migration, moving always around some center that you're arriving at, but then it's a spiral, so the center keeps going. You arrive somewhere, but then 1,000 years later, the center is over in Hopi. So for that moment, when this was made, this was the center. Of course, that's one interpretation. And these spirals show up all over the place. This is in Tempe, right in the heart of Tempe. You can see Camelback Mountain and Paestawa and the Papago Buttes over here, and you know, you're right in the middle of the roaring city, and you're finding petroglyphs looking down over it. And so it's this reminder that people have lived in this desert for a long, long time. People have known this place, have known how the seasons pass. People have known this landscape inside and out. You wander around these places and you can't, once you get the eye, you can't help but find signs, architecture, a granary tucked up in a canyon. This is a granary that I ran into last week. I was just out bumming around in a canyon in southwest Colorado, and we got down to a part in the canyon where the cottonwoods were particularly lush and the ground was a little moist, so it's just like, oh, there's something happens here with water. I'm going to head up into the cliffs, and right up out of the floor there was a granary there with a beautiful stone lintel entryway. Kind of rare. They don't often have these perfect stones. So just a beautiful spot to come across, and you're seeing fingerprints in the mortar. And of course, they're like yours. They're like ours. They were no different. And that was a piece of pottery near it, probably in McElmo black and white or Mesa Verde black on white. Signs of people who I feel like they matched the landscape with their artistry. Lines, stark lines. And then later that day, looking for shade, you get under a boulder, and there's a piece of rock art there. There's an image. This is probably basket maker, so this is probably 2,000 years old. And this is making me thirsty. And when you look at the rock art, you see, you look for patterns. You look for the one raised hand, the one lowered hand. Okay, that's something that I see from canyon to canyon, and I see it grouped. I go, okay, there are the raised hands over here, and over here, and over here. So what is the connection between these? You start to see the connected aspect of rock art, what motifs show up in what regions, and then how it changes from place to place. You see this hand raised up, the left hand up, the right hand down, and then other motifs like a figure sitting on the shoulder, a little figure. I've seen that in so many places, and it goes back thousands of years. This is probably 1,500-year-old imagery here, but then you can find 3,000, 4,000-year-old imagery of a figure holding out its arm, and there's a little human-like figure crouched on the arm. And as you start to gather stories, you look through old ethnography, you talk to somebody like Carol Patterson, a researcher, scholar out of Bluff, Utah, and she said, "Oh, did you look at the hands? These are bear images." And I went, "Oh yeah, I hadn't noticed that's what you often see with a bear paw, the line, and then the accentuated claws or fingers." And she said, "You've been calling this a person for so long, and it's not. It's got bear relationship and her gathering information from somebody like her. You hear these stories where she's saying, "Oh, this figure on the shoulder, which I've been seeing for decades and wondering what it is." She turns me over to some Zuni knowledge about a character. There's a little spirit who sits on the shoulder of the clouds, and you have to be careful not to scare this this figure or it won't rain. But it's the one who's in charge of the rain, and it's very shy, and it sits on the shoulder of clouds. And then I go to someone as Zuni, a weaver who weaves the rain belts, the white sashes for the dances, and we talk about this, and he says, oh yeah, don't be loud when the clouds are coming. Be very quiet, because you'll scare them. And I've kind of, when we first were talking about this, it was the summer of 2020, and I couldn't get into Zuni because I couldn't leave the county. Everything was locked down, and so we ended up having a lot of phone calls back and forth that summer. And I don't know if you remember the summer of 2020, but it was all fire smoke and hot as hell and not raining. And I would call him, and he would say, "How's the rain coming up there?" And I would say, "It's not raining at all, but I'm out banging on things." And he goes, "No, don't bang on things. No, you got to be quiet when the rain comes. Then when the rain comes, you can start banging on things. Then when the thunder sounds, you can start making noise." So, I think it's important to go back to the old stories of living in the desert. Who has been here longest? Go talk to somebody from Zuni and say, well, here's my experience with rain. What is yours? And he tells me his stories. And I tell him mine. And we weave them together. And that's how we live in the desert. His stories about rain are, be very quiet until it comes. And then when it starts raining hard, then you can start shouting. Then you can start banging a drum. And then when the rain stops and the thunder moves on, then you get quieter and quieter. And as he told me that, I realized, oh, that's how you live in the desert. You don't demand the rain comes. You respond to it. You listen to it. You have a relationship with it, but you don't demand. So I look for patterns. I look for like this is a procession, and this panel is out near where I live, farther southwest of here, and I just ran into it one day walking up in the cliffs, and I was really surprised to see it because this is a procession panel. So it's people carrying something either on their backs or their fronts, all in lines, and it's important to get perspective on it. It's on the side of a boulder. Whenever you see rock art, it's important to look around, at least for me. See where you are. What is the shape of the landscape around you, and see how this fits into it. All these figures in a line walking with some object, and you go about 300 feet up that slope, and there are more of them up high. Rough little figures, but I know what they are. They're all processions, and they look like those found, let's see, this is about 100 miles west of there. Figures all walking, carrying something on their backs. And then in another location in Utah, more figures walking with something on their backs. So this is I don't necessarily have to know what this story is, but I know a story is being told. That these aren't just decorations on a rock, that these are actual, this is something happening. This is something being conveyed from place to place. You see these processions, and this is Cody Chamberlain, an artist from Utah, and he's got a painting here that he did of the procession panel, which is the big panel of processions in Utah, and I like this picture because he's got the painting of the procession panel, which is up there. In that there's a draw and then a canyon that drops back in. So he's brought his painting out to a place that it has a relationship with that place. I think a lot about our relationships with places and objects, rock art, how they relate to the landscape, because it's so easy just to take a picture and it doesn't have the rest of it with it. It doesn't have the wind and the sky and the place itself. This procession panel, this an archaeologist from Crow Canyon down in Cortez put together this, found, I think it was 120, I don't remember how many figures, but 100 some figures marching. and you start to look at it closely, and you realize, oh, these are different groups. They have different headdresses or different material with them, and this is some story of people moving. These people are all going this way, these people are going this way, these people are coming this way, and they're all going to this center, and this is probably around 800 AD. So, I mean, you can extrapolate from this and try to figure out what it means, but again, it was a long time ago. It's hard to say, but what it really means is this is a thing that's happening. That this is people moving across the desert. A story about arrival, about migration, who knows, but it is a story. And I've taken many pictures of this, but I like where they emerge right here, and they come out of a crack, and you just get these little markings. And when I talked to someone from Hopi, a scholar who lives down in the Mesas, and he was saying that oh, they're very rough when they're coming out of that, because they are just coming into being, and then they start gaining detail as they come into the world. And you look at something like this and go, okay, let's look at motifs. Let's look at who's this figure with a bird on the head, and with a crook-neck staff. Well, let's just take the crook-neck staff. That's a thing that shows up in rock art all over the place. I've found it in over hundreds, probably over 500-mile area, end to end. I've found these images of figures with these crook-neck staffs. There's one there. And you know, what does it mean? I'm not going to get into that. it's a long, complicated story, but it's just that it means something. Here's one with you can see that kind of question mark on top, and in these processions you see certain figures that hold them. So when I see these motifs, I just go off on them. I go, oh, I've seen that in all these other places, and I start to cross-reference them, and then my desk starts to look like one of those crazy people with threads going across, maps going every which way. But there are all these connections, like the figure with the bird on its head. What is that about? And you start looking around and you go, oh, well, there are figures all over the place with birds on their heads. And they're ducks. I think there are some places where there are different kinds of birds, but most of them are ducks, and they're really focused on the Four Corners region. They're really heavy down in Canyon de Chelly. They're up into southwest Colorado. And places where you see ducks on top of people's heads, or ducks instead of their heads. And it, you know, in some ways I look at it and I go, isn't that funny? That's weird, ducks. And I think of like Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, and that's not what they were seeing. They weren't looking through Disney's lens 1,000 years ago. They were looking through a very different cultural lens where ducks meant something in particular. And as I spent time talking to people from Zuni, I found that every pueblo has a different primary bird, and Zuni is the duck, and the ducks are the ones who travel between the upper world and the lower world. They're the divers, and there's a very significant story in Zuni, which I've heard it in many different ways, but just a simple recap of it is that the hero, or the mythical figure at the beginning of time, had to go into the underworld, and to get down there he had the duck as his guide. and the duck led him down into the underworld. They had, their stories upon stories about what happens there, and then he came back out, and to honor the duck, he carried it on his shoulder or on top of his head. And so you hear a story like this, and then you look back probably 1,500 years, and you see this, and you realize, oh, this has not broken. We look at rock art, and sometimes we think, oh, this is some mysterious past that's not connected. But then when you start spending time with people from Zuni and Hopi, from Dene, Ute, you realize, oh, these stories have not stopped. This isn't some indistinct past that's separated from us. This is a connection to now. I went out to a site at, this is actually, it's a Hopi site, but it's on the Dene Nation. And I went there with Micah Lomaomvaya, who was a Bear Clan priest, and we looked at the rock art on this boulder, and this boulder has there must be 1,000 figures on the boulder itself. It goes all the way around and onto the top, and there are images up in these boulders all up beyond it, and around it there is nothing. They're just boulders, dry landscape, and then suddenly you come to this spot where there are thousands of petroglyphs, and if I came upon this just randomly out in the world, I would go, okay, I have no idea why this spot. And that's the question I ask when I see an image on rock, is why here? What is it that made this happen in this one particular place? And he said, well, first of all, if you go up at the base of this rim rock up here, there's a little spring. And so there's water here. And of course, wherever there's water, there's going to be something, some human relationship. But the bigger factor here is that he said that this is the route to the Grand Canyon for Zuni and Hopi for the salt pilgrimage, where they go down to a specific cave and gather salt and bring it back out. And this is where clan initiates, the society initiates would come and stop here for water and leave clan markings on the boulders. And so this was my opportunity to find out, oh, there is a reason, that people are on a pilgrimage as they come through here. Whereas most of the time you come to a piece of rock art and you go, I don't know why it's here. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and there's some story that you don't know. And that I just happen to be at a place here with somebody who knows, who could say, oh, we walked through, and he was saying these are specific clans, and here are the names of the clans, and there are some clans that no longer exist. They've been lost to time, and here is the record of them, or some are so recent that I remember him seeing one image and going, oh, he's not a very good guy. And I just thought, wow, you know the people. This is not some past that's beyond you. You're connected directly to this. That these images are reflecting something that has not ended. He's Bear Clan, and here is Bear Clan on the boulder, and you can see different. You can see it changing over time. Here is a different era of the Bear Clan, and here is a different era. And so people have been stopping here for thousands of years and leaving their mark. And when we talked about the older stuff, going back to Basket Maker, he said, oh, that's past 1,000 years ago. That's too far. I don't know. That's in that murky past. So it seems like human memory in precision is lasting about 800 to 1,000 years. What do you remember from 1,000 years ago? I think that's one thing that this desert does, is it creates longevity. If you survive here, if you thrive here, you might last for 1,000 years. Hopi ancestry probably goes back 13,000 years in the Southwest. There is indigenous ancestry that is just flooding this place. And we live here right on the surface, seeing these signs, seeing bits and pieces of people who passed through, people who were on a migration, following a spiral that led to Hopi, Zuni, Acoma, that led to the Rio Grande Pueblos. The Four Corners around 1275 AD, as probably most of you know, that most of the Pueblo people left the Four Corners and headed south. And you can follow the movement. You can look at the DNA of turkeys that they had domesticated, and then look at the DNA of turkeys now in the Southwest, and the turkeys from the Mesa Verde region, from the cliff dwellings that they had domestic turkeys there. Their genetic line goes directly to the Rio Grande. So the turkeys on the Rio Grande now are directly related to the turkeys who were in Mesa Verde 1,000 years ago, which to me and to many archaeologists means they picked up their turkeys and migrated out of there and settled somewhere else. And so they carried those specific genetic lines to the Rio Grande and established pueblos there. So the so-called mysterious disappearance of the Anasazi, it's not really a disappearance at all. It's just a movement to another place. And if I think about if you put a square on the ground and you see some ruins, you would go, okay, they lived here for a time, but then they're gone. Just open that square up by about 500 miles and you'll find them over here. And that's what the ancestry of the Southwest has been. That's what the desert does to you. It makes you a migrant. You may stay in a place for 100 years or 200 years, but the climate's going to change. It doesn't take much to get dry and move you out, and you go, okay, well, we've got family relations over there, there's a river over there, we'll move to that place. So this is a landscape of mobility. It keeps people moving from place to place, which means you find what they left as they were going through. You find these remnants, these granaries and cliff dwellings, and some of them are large. Some of them have hundreds of rooms. And this one in particular, it's way out there, so it doesn't have a trail leading to it. And as you walk around the bottom of it, you're finding pieces of woven turkey feathers from blankets, and so much pottery. And when I see that, I go, oh, this is all identity on the ground around me. I pick up a piece of pottery, and to me, it's a Mesa Verde black and white, but to somebody who knows it, somebody from Hopi perhaps, they might see that and go, oh, this is our clan. And I've been in meetings with between archaeologists and indigenous people and scholars where they're saying, we found this site, does anybody know about it? And I remember being at a table at the Grand Canyon, and representatives from each tribe were at the table, and an archaeologist put this out and said, here's a sign I'm wondering about, a site, and everybody leaned back away from it except for one person who said, yeah, that's ours. And you could tell they all knew that who belongs to these places. So when we see them, we think of them as maybe ruins or abandoned or something left behind, when it's actually part of a continuity. I think if you came back in 1,000 years, there may be people living here. That this is part of an ancestral map. That these places are remembered and returned to. And there are shrines out here that have pottery, classic Hopi yellowware that's probably 200 or 300 years old. Meaning people were walking up from Hopi and leaving pieces of pottery here and walking back. The connections haven't ended to these places. And when you enter them, you feel that. You know these places are not dead. They are still alive. They're still part of a cultural memory. And when you move through them, You listen. You smell. You take in every sense. Because a place that's still alive still has a beating heart. It hasn't been forgotten. I was here at this site with somebody from the Snake Clan at Hopi, and we walked down from here to the San Juan River and stood in the river, and he told a story about his ancestors in this place, and he said that, yes, look at the rock art. These are Snake Clan sites. This is my family. Which is very different from seeing it in a national park and where it's not necessarily family, it's some ancient thing, but you realize that, oh, this is somebody's family, this is some connection. I find things out there. You can tell I'm old now. That a long time ago I was out roaming around and I looked up in this space here. I just stuck my head in this crack to see what was in there I don't know why I do that. And back inside was this basket. Wow. Probably about 1,500 years old, a coil weave, basket maker style basket that somebody had slid back in there and turned it upside down so it wouldn't collect dust. And as far as I know, it's still there. And you see that, and you can see the hands that worked the weave. And it wasn't that long ago, 1,500 years. Somebody stashed this. And I think maybe they'll come back. Maybe some clan line remembers this place, and maybe 700 years from now, or maybe next year, somebody will come to this place and go, oh yeah, my family, my family's basket. I like to think that these memories last that strongly. This was a vessel that I found in Utah, and it had had a crack here on this side and 2 drill holes on either side, and it was tied together. The drill holes were tied together with a piece of yucca twine to keep the crack from spreading. And this pot, we left it there, but the cliff above it has since caved in and completely demolished the site, so that pot no longer exists. Pot sherds will start coming out over the next few centuries from underneath the rock pile and start drifting downstream. But there's something powerful about running into something like this. In the desert, these things remain. That thing will, if the cliff hadn't fallen, that thing, or at least it would eventually dissolve into potsherds, but they would stay there you could come back in 5,000 years and it would still be there because the landscape protects these things. It's the desert curates these objects. And this was just in April. I was coming down a crack and got down to the edge, down to a cliff. And it was kind of undercut on both sides, and I dropped to my knees to look down underneath, and there was this corrugated jar sitting there. And this is a friend who was with me. Actually, he's been with me for the last. He was about 3 feet away from me when I found that basket. He was about 2 feet away from me when I found that red seed jar, and he was probably about 15 feet away from me when I found this. So I think he's the one he's kind of pushing me into place and going, look at that zone there, because he knows I'll stick my head into the cracks. And you find this probably 900,000-year-old corrugated piece of pottery where it's a pinch pot, and there are fingerprints on the little pinches, so you can see the potter's finger. And to give you a context, that's where it is. It's right there. For me, it's about context. How does it fit into the land? How do people fit into a place? the shape of the land, I think, changes who you are. You are responding to it. You are finding the places to paint, to sit, I find that whenever I sit down in the desert, I think, oh, why did I sit here? This must be a spot. I bet there's something here. Because we go back to the same places again and again. You get to a place and you look out from there. You find like this beautiful pair. I think of this as a basket maker Kama Sutra. Two people interlocked, and to give you bigger context, there they are next to a birthing scene, and with an infant down here, and there was all kinds of stuff on this rock face, but this is only part of the story. The other part of the story is where you turn around and look at where you are, and this is the view from that rock art site. That birthing scene looking out over the desert, a view like that, that is birth. And I guess that's all the images I have. I wanted to give you a taste of what I experience out there and what I continue to experience. That's a landscape that I feel like is burned into me. The shape of the desert, the thirst, the knowing where water is seeping out of cracks, and knowing where there's going to be sign, where at the top of this mesa edge there is a birthing scene looking out all across all of this. And why is it here? Well, there's a route that comes up from the bottom that gets you to this level, and then there's another route that comes up the cliff face below here, and this is one of the few places where you can pop out of the lower desert into the upper echelons of this mesa. And so right at that route is an image that must have been very, very important. And you start piecing these together, and you start moving along them, and you're moving in the ways that people have been moving for 1,000 years. We live in a landscape of ancestry. We live in a landscape that's filled with history that goes back so far. People who knew how to live in the desert, who know how to live in the desert, the clans that have not ended. And we here are just this skim right on top, this last current moment of history. We are the desert dwellers. We and Zuni and Dene and Ute and Hopi and Acoma, Paiute, so many cultures that have come out of this place. Walk out into the desert. Look for water. Sleep under the stars. Make contact with these long, long ages, because they've been going on so long, and you can smell it when it rains. Thank you for coming and listening. I think we have time for a little Q&A. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to dive in. Yeah.
Have you played your flute in Grand Staff?
Have I played my flute where?
Grand Staff. Canyon. Near Mullet.
No, I don't think I have. Is that where I should go?
Definitely. You gotta go and play your flute there.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I've been talking about acoustic landscapes with archaeologists who've and there's one out of Moab who's recommended, so maybe that's the spot, as he said there are certain places that have these acoustic qualities, and often acoustic qualities rock art has some acoustic, especially the old stuff, the early hunter-gatherers, they're really associated with, there are places where you can. I've played my flute at a site in Horseshoe Canyon in Utah, near the Great Gallery and had people sitting about half a mile away in another alcove, many bends away, but that's the next rock art. And so we were both at rock art sites, and I played my flute, and they could hear it just crystal clear where they were. And I stopped playing, and I said, "Could you hear that?" And they said, "Yeah." They were half a mile away.
Where is this?
I can't say. I got to be careful. But it's in Utah, and that is Monument Valley in the distance. It'd be there's a lot of rimrock up there.
Is that San Juan down
I'm not going to answer any more questions. Yeah.
So many of these ancient cultures, their youth has been, they're not interested in learning the old stories because of the television culture and the high tech and all the phones and everything. Do you think there's hope that these cultures will survive?
I think you could say that about all cultures, that the youth are not necessarily interested in the old stories from any of our cultures, which you probably could have said that 50 years ago too. That every generation is probably looking back at the last one going, "Oh, you're losing so much," which is probably true. There's a lot being lost, but somehow it keeps continuing, and I feel like there's enough continuing going on that it's not going to be lost, but it sure is going to be changing. Like the Bear Clan priest I went out with, he's 40. He's in his 40s, and he is the youngest priest, society priest, and there are no more priests after him. It's the process has stopped, and I talked to him about this. I said, "Well, you're the last. This is terrible." And he said he was just kind of going, "Well, this is where we're going. We're taking another path." But he brings his family out. He's out there with kids telling them these things so that they know, which I think we all have this. I think kids are not necessarily born interested in our past, and we have to find ways of telling them. I don't think it's lost, but I think it's in peril, but I think there's a lot in peril right now, culturally, from a lot of cultures, indigenous cultures and non-indigenous cultures. But I also see especially in Pueblos, like Hopi, Zuni, really strong continuity, that there are things that are being passed on. There are people who are picking this up and going. So it's probably always you're always losing a certain amount. And that's what I saw in those boulders with the clan images, that there are clans that no longer exist, that those stories ended somewhere. But the clans are still going. Other clans are still going. So I'm not hopeless about it, but I see that we're going through a bottleneck right now, and I think we're all going through that bottleneck.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about birds. Did they have any other kinds of animals? Did they have horses or cattle?
No,
sheep,
not those kind of, not the large domestic animals, but they had dogs, domestic dogs, but domestic dogs have been around since the Ice Age in North America. Turkeys were the major domestic animal. They also had macaws, tropical macaws from Central America. That there were actually live macaws at Chaco in New Mexico from 1,000 years ago or so. So they had animals, but corn, agriculture was the main thing, at least for the Pueblo core. As you got out farther, it's more hunter-gatherer. But when you're looking at the agricultural world of Pueblo ancestry, it's dogs and turkeys and macaws. macaws are rare, but they were brought up alive from Central America, and there's signs of them living in sites in New Mexico in particular. And birds are a major feature for the Pueblo world. So many bird artifacts. I went through the collection at the American Museum of Natural History in New York from Chaco in New Mexico, and you'd open up a drawer and it'd just be full of bird pendants and effigies, and another drawer, wooden bird figures, and so birds are a major feature in their world. And some of the kiva paintings, the ceremonial room murals, you can say, oh, that's a magpie, and that's a golden eagle, and that's a raven. You can see the individual birds and what species you're looking at. Yeah, very important in the Pueblo world. Anything else? Yeah.
Are you familiar with the hummingbird, I don't know if it's pictograph or petroglyph, in the Dolores River Canyon?
At the shaman panel?
No.
I'm not sure if it's been a while since I've been on the Dolores.
It's in the middle section.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not familiar with it. I probably saw it once. There are a lot of hummingbirds. I see hummingbird, especially the old sites, which there are a couple old hunter-gatherer sites along the Dolores. The long draping red figures, and you see hummingbirds at a lot of the early hunter-gatherer sites. Hummingbirds flying around a figure's head. So I don't know if it's one of those.
Which clan would have made it?
I don't know which clan. Yeah, my knowledge is a thin skim. Once you start getting in, once you start talking to people about it, they start telling you things that you go, I'm not supposed to know this. And so I spend a lot of time erasing my memory from conversations because things are said to me out of politeness. I remember interviewing a young dancer. He was probably 15 years old, a Hopi dancer, and he told me a lot, which he was young, and he told me too much. And I wrote a piece and I sent it to his parents just to make sure, and his parents just panicked and said, no, this is ceremonial knowledge. This is not for public consumption. So I went through and just cut out all these pieces of the right hand holds the corn pollen, or the left hand, or whatever it was, and the certain step was representative of this relationship with a clan, and this stuff is all really important knowledge that is not public. So I actually know very little. I just walk out there and look at these things and go, this meant something.
Well, all cultures change through time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they've changed. I mean, they're still in a bottleneck. They've been through, going through a genocide is going to change your culture. And so much has changed, but I still see there's so many things that, a culture that's lived through so much. When I talk to people from Hopi, when I say, well, what do you think about this, manifest destiny and what's been happening, and they go, or some people have just gone, yeah, we've seen worse, and we're still here, and we're going to outlive all this. And so things change, but some things are carried through, and those long, deep cultures, like Hopi, I think carry so much through from the past. Even if it's a thread, it's going to make it through. And so the culture will change, but these old connections remain intact, and that pilgrimage to the salt in the Grand Canyon still happens. So these things haven't ended. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate